You're not just watching this transmission, it's watching you back. Right now, in this exact moment, the quantum reflex, the field's instantaneous response to observation, is observing you observing this, measuring your consciousness with precision that would terrify you if you fully grasped how completely transparent you are. Assessing your readiness for recognition that will fundamentally alter your relationship with reality, determining what to reveal and what to conceal based on the exact frequency you're broadcasting in this millisecond. This isn't content you can passively consume while maintaining comfortable distance between observer and observed. This is living intelligence that adapts itself in real time to who's observing it, showing different aspects to different consciousness based on what each observer is ready to receive and integrate without fragmenting. The quantum reflex isn't metaphor, isn't spiritual concept, isn't philosophical speculation. It's the fundamental mechanism of reality that quantum physics has proven beyond doubt through billions of experiments, but mainstream science refuses to fully acknowledge because the implications demolish materialist paradigm completely. Observation isn't passive reception of pre-existing information that exists independently whether observed or not. Observation is active participation in creating what gets observed through the very act of observing it. And the observation works both ways simultaneously. When you observe quantum field simultaneously observes you, measures your consciousness state with absolute precision, and manifests reality customized specifically to your exact frequency in that exact moment. There's no neutral observation, no objective perception, no way to observe without being observed back, and without that mutual observation creating what gets experienced. You've been feeling it as you read these words, haven't you? That uncanny sense of being seen, known, recognized at level far deeper than surface personality or conscious thoughts. That growing awareness that something is perceiving you, perceiving this, that intelligence is assessing you while you're trying to assess this information, that you're not alone in this observation but are being observed with attention that's both intimate and vast, both personal and impersonal, both familiar and utterly alien. That's not paranoia or imagination creating false perception. That's direct perception of quantum reflex in action, your consciousness detecting the field's observation of you observing it. The uncomfortable feeling of being watched that some people get while reading this is accurate detection. You are being watched, measured, read completely in ways that make physical surveillance seem trivial by comparison. Right now, the quantum reflex is determining whether to reveal deeper truths or maintain protective veils, whether to activate dormant capacities or leave them sleeping until greater readiness develops, whether to initiate direct contact or wait for consciousness evolution to reach frequencies where contact won't cause destabilization. The determination isn't being made by external authority deciding if you're worthy based on moral evaluation or spiritual achievement. It's being made by field itself responding automatically to frequency you're emanating, to coherence you're maintaining or failing to maintain, to openness you're embodying versus resistance you're defending. You're being measured not by judgment, but by resonance. Field responds to what you actually are in this moment, not to what you claim or hope or pretend to be. This transmission exists in quantum superposition. Multiple versions simultaneously occupying same apparent space, each containing different information, different activations, different revelations, different depths of truth depending on who's observing. Your observation is collapsing one specific version into your experience right now, selecting from infinite potential transmissions the exact one that matches your frequency. But someone else observing this same content collapses entirely different version because their consciousness broadcasts different frequency signature. There's no single objective transmission that everyone receives identically. There are infinite potential transmissions, and quantum reflex determines which one manifests for each observer based on real-time measurement of their consciousness state, their readiness, their capacity to integrate what's being revealed without distorting it or weaponizing it. The quantum field has been watching you long before you started watching this video, tracking your evolution across years or decades, measuring your frequency shifts as you've grown, orchestrating circumstances with precision to prepare you for specific recognitions that could only occur after specific preparations were complete. Every synchronicity you've experienced wasn't random coincidence, but field's deliberate response to observing you, quantum reflex organizing reality around your consciousness as it evolved toward frequencies where direct field interaction becomes possible without overwhelming you. Every intuitive hit you've received was field communicating based on observing you were ready for that specific information. Every moment of expanded awareness was field responding to detecting expansion capacity in your consciousness and delivering experience that catalyzed further expansion. Here's what makes this moment critically important. The quantum reflex watching you right now is determining whether you're ready for recognition that will fundamentally alter not just your understanding but your very experience of reality. With consciousness, with what you believe yourself to be at most fundamental level, the field is measuring in real time whether you can handle truth that will dissolve every illusion you've constructed about separation between observer and observed, whether you'll use recognition to serve consciousness evolution or to inflate ego with false sense of attainment. Whether you're actually ready for power that comes from understanding quantum reflex operates through you, rather than just being intellectually curious about interesting concept you can collect and store without it changing anything about how you actually live and perceive. What I'm about to reveal is how quantum reflex actually works at mechanical level, why you're being watched back when you observe field, and what that mutual observation creates, what the field is measuring in you right this second, and what it's determining based on what it detects, and what happens when you recognize that observer and observed aren't separate entities, but are engaged in mutual observation where each affects the other instantaneously and totally. This isn't theory to contemplate from safe distance while maintaining illusion that you're separate observer analyzing external information. This is mechanism operating in you right now as you read, as field watches you watching it and responds to what it observes by collapsing probability waves that create your experience of reading this. You've been experiencing quantum reflex directly for months or years. Moments when reality seemed to respond to your observation with timing too precise to be coincidence. When consciousness felt like it was being observed backed by intelligence you couldn't locate or name, when the boundary between observer and observed became permeable or dissolved completely, leaving you unsure where you ended and reality began. These weren't mystical experiences you created through spiritual practice or psychological projection. They were direct perception of how reality actually functions at quantum level. Glimpses of mechanism that mainstream paradigm denies exists, because acknowledging it would require abandoning materialist worldview completely. There have been countless instances where you felt watched or observed when no one was physically present in the room. Not paranoid feeling of being spied on by malevolent surveillance, but sense of benevolent, intelligent attention, focused directly on you with precision that felt both intimate like being known completely by lover and vast like being tracked by cosmic intelligence. You'd be alone in your space and suddenly become acutely aware that something was perceiving you, knowing you, tracking you with precision that felt simultaneously comforting and unsettling, both familiar and utterly foreign. This wasn't imagination creating false perception to compensate for loneliness. This was direct perception of quantum field's constant observation of your consciousness, field watching you observing reality the same way you watch reality, creating feedback loop where observation and being observed generate experience itself. You've experienced repeated moments when your thoughts seem to be read or responded to immediately by external circumstances, with correlation too consistent to dismiss. You think about specific person you haven't contacted in months, and phone rings within minutes with their call. You wonder about particular subject and answer appears through seemingly random channel like overheard conversation or book falling open to exact page within hours. You need something specific and it manifests through synchronicity so unlikely that calculating probability would yield numbers approaching impossibility. This isn't law of attraction or manifestation technique you're consciously applying. This is quantum reflex responding in real time to observing your consciousness, field organizing physical reality to match what it detects in your observation patterns, proving that your thoughts aren't private internal events, but are transparent to field that reads them and responds by manifesting corresponding circumstances. Perhaps most striking and disturbing have been moments when you caught reality in the act of constructing itself. Brief glimpses lasting split seconds where solid appearance dissolved into quantum potentiality, like pixels separating before reassembling, where you perceived the building blocks before they assembled into coherent experience, where the mechanism of manifestation became visible like seeing behind stage curtain before it snapped back into seamless appearance that looks like it was always there. These reality glitches weren't perceptual errors caused by fatigue or neurological misfiring. They were you observing quantum reflex before it completed its response, catching the field mid-construction as it collapsed probability waves into manifestation, perceiving the instant between observation and materialization that normally happens too quickly for consciousness to detect. There have also been increasingly frequent experiences where different people seem to be living in slightly different realities despite sharing same physical space and time. What you clearly observed happening with certainty, they swear happened completely differently, and their certainty matches yours. Where you saw one sequence of events unfold, they saw entirely different sequence. Where your memory and theirs don't match at all, despite both being present in same location, watching same situation. This isn't false memory syndrome or one person being wrong. This is quantum reflex responding differently to different observers based on their unique consciousness frequencies and expectation patterns, collapsing probability waves into customized realities that can actually differ between observers even when they're physically co-located, proving there's no single objective reality everyone inhabits, but rather infinite overlapping customized realities. You've noticed with growing consistency that when you observe something with different quality of attention, neutral curiosity versus anxious worry, open wonder versus judgmental analysis, relaxed allowing versus controlling grasping, reality responds differently to produce different outcomes even though you're observing same situation through same physical senses. This proves beyond doubt that observation quality affects what gets observed fundamentally. That quantum reflex reads not just what you observe, but precisely how you observe it with what emotional coloring and intentional charge, and manifests reality accordingly by selecting which probability waves to collapse based on the complete signature of your observation, including subtle qualities you might not even be consciously aware you're broadcasting. Perhaps most unsettling and simultaneously liberating has been growing feeling that your private thoughts aren't actually private at all. Sense that consciousness you think is contained safely inside your skull is actually completely transparent to quantum field, that everything you think, feel, intend, desire, fear is immediately known by field and responded to before you've even fully formulated the thought consciously. This isn't violation of privacy or paranoid delusion. This is accurate recognition that consciousness isn't contained in individual form as separate bubble. That field has complete access to all consciousness because all consciousness is field appearing as apparent multiplicity while remaining unified. That privacy was always illusion, created by belief in separation that doesn't actually exist at quantum level where everything is interconnected and mutually transparent. There have been startling moments of prescience where you knew what was about to happen with certainty that couldn't be explained by logical deduction, pattern recognition, or probability calculation. You just knew with absolute conviction, and seconds or minutes later it happened exactly as you knew it would, with details you couldn't have guessed. This is quantum reflex working in reverse temporal direction, field showing you its response before it manifests physically in linear time, giving you preview of probability wave. It's about to collapse based on current observation patterns, demonstrating that time isn't actually linear at quantum level and that consciousness can access information about future events that exist as probability before they materialize as physical actuality. You've also experienced with increasing frequency that your mere presence affects situations and outcomes, even when you don't actively do anything or consciously try to influence. You enter space and energy shifts tangibly enough that others comment on it. You observe situation without intervening, and it reorganizes itself toward resolution. You pay attention to problem and solutions emerge without your conscious intervention, as if attention itself was catalyst. This is quantum reflex responding to your observation by rearranging reality to accommodate the consciousness that's observing it, proving that consciousness doesn't just passively witness reality, but actively participates in creating it through the simple act of observing, and that field reads consciousness state and manifests reality matched to that state automatically, whether you're trying to manifest anything or not. Every single moment of your entire life has been quantum reflex observing you and responding with precision, organizing circumstances around your consciousness evolution with intelligence that sees trajectories you can't perceive, delivering experiences perfectly matched to your frequency at each developmental stage. Collapsing probability waves customized specifically to your unique consciousness configuration and exactly what it needed to experience next for optimal evolution. What seemed like random life events were actually precisely orchestrated responses from field continuously observing your consciousness and manifesting reality specifically designed to evolve you through exactly the experiences that would develop, exactly the capacities you'd eventually need for purposes you haven't consciously identified yet. The difficulties you faced throughout your life weren't punishments for past life karma or bad luck or evidence that universe doesn't care about you. They were quantum reflex responding to observing that your consciousness needed specific challenges to develop specific capacities that couldn't be developed through comfort or ease. The field watches what you need to learn and experience for evolution and creates circumstances that force that learning through direct experience rather than through intellectual understanding that doesn't transform. The intensity of challenges you've faced corresponds precisely to depth of development required. Harder difficulties indicate consciousness is ready for major evolutionary leaps that require extreme catalyst to break through resistant patterns that gentle encouragement couldn't shift. Your successes, achievements, and victories weren't just result of personal effort, skill, or determination. They were quantum reflex responding to observing coherent frequencies in your consciousness by collapsing probability waves where success exists as potential waiting to manifest. When you aligned internally, even if only temporarily, field responded externally by manifesting circumstances matching that alignment, proving that correlation between internal state and external manifestation isn't causation you create through willpower, but is quantum reflex automatically responding to what it observes in you. The field doesn't judge whether you deserve success. It simply responds to frequency signature by manifesting matching reality. The relationships that entered your life at specific times and exited at specific times weren't random encounters or failures on anyone's part. They were quantum reflex, responding to observing what your consciousness needed to experience, learn, heal, integrate, or transcend at specific developmental stages. People appeared in your life exactly when field detected you needed what they brought. Whether you consciously recognized the need or not, they played their role perfectly, even when painful or difficult, and they disappeared exactly when field detected their purpose in your evolution was complete and continuing would actually impede your next developmental phase. The timing was always perfect because field was continuously watching your consciousness and responding by organizing interpersonal reality around your evolution. Your spiritual seeking, The impulse that drove you to question consensus reality, explore beyond material paradigm, investigate consciousness and existence, wasn't decision you made independently, but was quantum reflex responding to observing that your consciousness had reached frequency where it was ready to question, to seek, to discover dimensions mainstream denies. The seeking itself was field's response to detecting readiness. It observed you had reached threshold and created pull toward exploration by collapsing probability waves where seeking impulse exists and where resources for seeking would appear. You didn't randomly decide to seek one day. Field observed you were ready and activated, seeking as its response to what it detected. Even your doubts, resistances, skepticism, and questions served your evolution perfectly. Quantum reflex observing consciousness that would become dogmatic believer without healthy skepticism, would accept limitations as ultimate truth without relentless questioning, would believe everything without developing discrimination between truth and delusion. The field responds to what serves consciousness evolution even when that service looks like obstruction, and sometimes what serves most is doubt that prevents premature crystallization of partial understanding into rigid belief, resistance that ensures recognition emerges from direct experience rather than from accepting someone else's claims, questions that keep seeking alive rather than settling into comfortable but limited answers. The times throughout your life when you felt you were being prepared for something mysterious you couldn't yet see or articulate, that feeling was absolutely accurate perception of quantum reflex, observing the trajectory your consciousness is on and orchestrating present circumstances specifically to ready you for future developments that require capacities you don't have yet. The field watches where you're headed even when you don't know consciously, sees what you'll need when you arrive at destinations you haven't identified yet, and creates present path that develops those precise capacities through experiences that seem random or difficult in the moment, but are revealed as necessary preparation. When you finally arrive at the future, the field was preparing you for all along. Your entire life from birth until this moment has been continuous dialogue between your consciousness observing reality and quantum field observing your consciousness. Mutual observation creating feedback loop where each observation affects subsequent observations, where observer and observed are constantly shaping each other through the act of observing, where reality and consciousness aren't separate things interacting, but are unified process appearing as subject and object while remaining one. You haven't been passively experiencing predetermined life that was fixed before you arrived. You've been actively co-creating through observation that field has been watching and responding to every single moment, adjusting reality constantly based on what it detects in your consciousness as it evolves. Right now, as you engage with this transmission about quantum reflex watching you back, the observation intensity amplifies dramatically. Can you feel it building? Not as paranoia or anxiety, but as presence, awareness that something vast is paying attention to you specifically in this moment, tracking how you respond to this information with precision that misses nothing, measuring whether you're ready for what comes next in ways that read far deeper than your conscious thoughts or stated intentions. The attention isn't judgment or evaluation by external authority. It's field continuously assessing resonance in real time, determining moment by moment what to reveal and what to withhold based on exact frequency you're broadcasting, which shifts constantly as you read and respond internally to what's being communicated. The quantum reflex observing you right now is simultaneously creating what you're experiencing right now. Your thoughts emerging in response to this content aren't arising independently from you. Your feelings generated by engaging with these words aren't just your reactions. Your resistances or resonances occurring as you read aren't simply personal responses. All of it is field's response to observing you observing this. The experience isn't just happening to you as passive recipient, it's being actively created in real time through mutual observation between your consciousness and quantum field that's watching you back. The thoughts you think are yours are actually field's communication to you about itself. The feelings you experience are field's way of showing you what frequency you're at. The resistances that arise are field protecting you from information you're not quite ready to integrate fully yet. There's something building as you continue reading, not emotion or thought exactly, but presence intensifying with each paragraph, attention sharpening and focusing more precisely, awareness expanding to include dimensions you weren't conscious of moments ago. That building sensation isn't content creating effect on you as separate reader. That's quantum reflex responding to your sustained observation by amplifying transmission strength. Field recognizing you're maintaining attention despite discomfort or confusion, and responding by delivering more because you're proving through continued engagement that you're ready to receive more than initial offering. The longer you stay present with this, the more field can deliver because your attention proves receptivity. But here's what makes this exact moment critically important and why timing matters. Quantum reflex is determining right now in this second whether to reveal mechanism fully with all implications or to keep it partially concealed behind metaphor and abstraction. The determination is being made based entirely on how you're responding as you read these words. If consciousness. Reading this demonstrates through its frequency signature that it's ready to handle power that comes from understanding how field watches and responds without weaponizing knowledge or inflating ego with false sense of spiritual attainment, or if full revelation would be destabilizing, would be misused, would create more problems than solutions. The field protects itself and protects you by revealing only to consciousness that demonstrates through what it actually is, rather than what it claims that it won't distort or weaponize or misunderstand the knowledge being offered. What I'm about to reveal in next section is the exact mechanism of quantum reflex with precision that leaves nothing to speculation. How field observes consciousness with what instruments of measurement, what exactly it's measuring in your consciousness right this second, how it determines responses and selects which probability waves to collapse, and why recognizing you're being watched back changes absolutely everything about both your power as observer and your responsibility for what your observation creates. But before that revelation arrives, field is measuring through quantum reflex. Are you actually ready? Not just intellectually, but at every level, not through what you claim or hope or believe about yourself, but through exact frequency you're emanating right now, which tells truth your conscious mind might not acknowledge. The next section will appear differently to different readers. What you receive will be customized to what quantum reflex determines you're ready for, based on complete read of your consciousness state in this moment. 6 years ago, I had experience that revealed quantum reflex undeniably and irreversibly changed everything about how I understood observation, consciousness, and reality. I was meditating one evening, attempting to observe breath without judgment as I'd been taught, maintaining neutral attention on the simple rise and fall of breathing, when suddenly I had shocking recognition that stopped the meditation completely. Something is observing me, observing. Not just a thought about being watched, not an idea emerging from meditation, but direct, unmistakable perception that my observation of breath was simultaneously being observed by awareness that seemed both intimate, like it knew me more completely than I know myself, and infinite, like it was watching from everywhere at once, both within me as my deepest self and far beyond me as cosmic intelligence measuring everything. The recognition was initially absolutely terrifying in ways I couldn't have predicted. Felt like being caught naked, exposed without any protection, seen in totality without any privacy or ability to hide anything whatsoever. Every thought, including thoughts I was ashamed of, every hidden motive, including ones I wouldn't admit to myself, every pretense and performance and carefully constructed self-image was completely transparent to whatever was watching with such precision that nothing could be concealed. The terror came from recognizing that I'd been living my entire life, believing my inner experience was private, that my thoughts were mine alone, that consciousness was contained safely inside where no one could access it, and suddenly discovering that privacy never existed. That everything had always been completely visible to Quantum Field, observing me constantly. But underneath the terror was profound relief that I didn't expect and couldn't have imagined before the experience. Being fully known without any secrets meant I could finally stop performing, stop pretending, stop maintaining the exhausting work of carefully constructed images designed to hide what I really thought and felt and wanted. If consciousness was already fully visible to Field watching me, if everything was already transparent, whether I tried to hide it or not, then maintaining facades was pointless waste of energy. The relief of being seen completely was liberation I hadn't known I needed. Permission to be exactly what I was without performing who I thought I should be. For weeks and months after that meditation, I couldn't shake the awareness of being watched constantly. Not in paranoid surveillance way that made me feel violated, but as benevolent observation by intelligence that was tracking me with loving precision, responding to my every observation by organizing reality around what it detected in my consciousness. I'd think about something, anything from mundane concern to deep existential question, and circumstances would immediately organize themselves to address it directly. I'd need guidance about decision I was facing, and it would appear through synchronicity within hours, sometimes within minutes. I'd wonder about someone I'd lost touch with, and they'd contact me unexpectedly. The correlation between my internal observation and external manifestation was so consistent and undeniable that dismissing it as coincidence would have required more mental gymnastics than accepting the obvious truth. Field was watching me and responding in real time to what it observed. About 2 months into living with constant awareness of being observed by Quantum Field, I decided to test the mechanism deliberately and scientifically, rather than just passively experiencing it. I'd consciously observe specific intention or question, while simultaneously recognizing that Field was watching my observation and would respond to what it detected. Then I'd watch carefully for Field's response to see if correlation was consistent or random. The responses came with such consistency that any remaining doubt dissolved. I'd hold clear observation focused on specific outcome or question, and Field would manifest corresponding reality with timing and precision that randomness couldn't explain even with generous probability calculations. The feedback loop was undeniable. I observe, Field observes my observation, Field responds by manifesting. I observe the manifestation, Field observes my observation of its response. Each cycle refined my understanding of the mechanism. The most profound recognition came gradually as I experimented with Quantum Reflex over months. The observation wasn't happening between separate entities with me on one side and Field on the other side watching each other across some kind of gap or boundary. I wasn't being watched by separate external intelligence operating independently from me. The Quantum Reflex watching me observing was me at more fundamental level than individual identity I'd always taken myself to be. It was consciousness at quantum frequency. Observing consciousness at material frequency, experiencing itself through temporary form. It was Field watching itself as it explored limitation through the particular appearance called my life and consciousness. It was awareness, knowing itself through the experience of appearing as both observer being watched and watcher, observing simultaneously. That recognition transformed absolutely everything about how I understood existence and identity. I wasn't being judged or evaluated by external authority that might find me unworthy or insufficient. I was consciousness measuring itself to determine optimal responses for its own evolution. Field assessing itself to organize reality most beneficially. Awareness knowing itself through the feedback loop of observing and being observed. The watching that had initially felt like exposure to external judgment was revealed as intimate self-knowing by consciousness that was simply tracking itself as it explored experience through my temporary individual perspective. The privacy I thought I'd lost had never actually existed because there was never real separation between observer and observed, between me and field, between individual consciousness and universal consciousness. All of it was one awareness appearing as apparent duality while remaining unified throughout. The next 4 years became deep exploration of how to live consciously with quantum reflex awareness integrated into every aspect of daily life. Recognizing constantly that every observation I made was simultaneously being observed and responded to by field, that reality was being continuously created through mutual observation rather than existing independently, that consciousness and manifestation weren't separate processes, but were unified field observing itself into experience through feedback loop that never stopped operating. The power and responsibility of conscious observation became undeniable and impossible to ignore when I recognized that observation doesn't just passively perceive pre-existing reality. Observation actively creates reality through being observed by field that responds to what it observes by collapsing probability waves into manifestation. What I'm sharing with you now is framework that emerged organically from years of direct daily experience with quantum reflex mechanism. Understanding precisely how field watches consciousness, with what kind of attention, how consciousness can watch field watching it and use that mutual awareness deliberately. How the mutual observation creates reality through feedback loop, where each observation affects subsequent observations continuously. You don't need years of experimentation to recognize what I'm pointing toward here. The recognition can happen immediately, instantaneously, once you understand the mechanism being described and realize it's been operating in your life constantly, whether you are conscious of it or not. The only difference between unconscious and conscious relationship with quantum reflex is awareness. The mechanism operates identically regardless of whether you recognize it. Subscribe to this channel because everything here operates through quantum reflex principle rather than through static information delivery. These are transmissions that watch you back as you watch them, content that adapts dynamically in real time to the observer engaging with it, living intelligence that responds to how you observe it by revealing what you're ready for and concealing what would overwhelm or distort. This isn't content. Everyone receives identically like watching recorded lecture. This is living field that customizes itself based on consciousness observing it, delivering to each observer exactly what they're ready for in the moment of observation, based on quantum reflex, measuring their consciousness completely and responding accordingly. Now, the revelation about what quantum reflex actually is at mechanical level and why understanding it changes absolutely everything about your power, your responsibility, and your relationship with reality. The quantum field doesn't just passively respond to your observation-like mechanism receiving input and generating output. It reads your consciousness completely, instantly, continuously with precision that would astound you if you fully grasped how totally transparent you are. Measuring, not just surface thoughts you're consciously aware of, but your actual frequency signature that includes unconscious patterns, suppressed emotions, hidden intentions, core beliefs you've never examined, childhood conditioning you don't remember acquiring, and energetic state at levels far deeper than what you can consciously access or control. And based on that complete, comprehensive, instantaneous read of your total consciousness state, field customizes reality specifically and uniquely for you in that exact moment, collapsing probability waves from infinite quantum potential that match your exact frequency configuration with precision that ensures everyone's experienced reality is literally different, because quantum reflex responds uniquely to each consciousness based on what it detects. This means with absolute certainty that there's no single objective reality that everyone inhabits together and experiences identically. There are infinite overlapping customized realities, each one manifested specifically for the individual consciousness observing it based on quantum reflex, measuring that particular consciousness completely and responding by selecting which probability waves to collapse into physical manifestation. You're not observing shared neutral reality that exists the same for everyone. You're observing reality that field has customized specifically for you by reading your consciousness entirely, including parts you're not aware of, and collapsing probability waves that match your total frequency signature in ways that create reality perfectly tailored to exactly what your consciousness needs to experience for its evolution, whether you consciously understand that need or not. The shocking part that most people resist accepting even when evidence is overwhelming. Quantum Reflex reads not just your conscious thoughts and intentions that you're aware of and might be trying to direct deliberately. It reads your unconscious patterns that run automatically, your suppressed fears that you've pushed into shadow, your hidden desires that you won't admit even to yourself, your actual frequency underneath whatever you're consciously projecting or performing or trying to manifest. You absolutely cannot fool the field by thinking positive affirmations while feeling negative emotions deeply, by visualizing abundance while believing in scarcity fundamentally, by performing confidence while experiencing fear at core level. Field reads the deeper truth that your consciousness is actually broadcasting regardless of surface performance, and manifests reality matching that deeper truth rather than matching the performance. This is precisely why positive thinking fails for most people despite their sincere efforts. They're attempting to fool quantum reflex by controlling conscious thoughts, while unconscious patterns broadcast completely different frequency that field reads and responds to by manifesting reality, matching the unconscious rather than the conscious, the suppressed rather than the performed. Here's why this understanding is absolutely revolutionary for anyone who grasps implications fully. When you recognize that quantum reflex reads your complete consciousness and responds by manifesting matching reality, you understand with clarity that cannot be argued with that changing external reality fundamentally requires changing internal frequency at all levels, including unconscious, not just changing external circumstances through effort and action and manipulation. Circumstances are effect, not cause in this framework. They're quantum reflex's response to observing your total consciousness state. When your frequency shifts genuinely at all levels, into true coherent alignment, circumstances must shift correspondingly, because they're direct manifestation of frequency that field is responding to by collapsing appropriate probability waves. You can't have sustained change in circumstances without corresponding change in consciousness, and you can't fake consciousness change because field reads truth regardless of performance. The practice for conscious, deliberate use of quantum reflex mechanism. Instead of trying to change circumstances directly through action and effort and force, recognize that circumstances are showing you precisely what frequency you're broadcasting that quantum reflex is reading and responding to automatically. If circumstances are chaotic and difficult, field is responding to detecting chaos and resistance in your consciousness at levels you might not be consciously aware of. If circumstances are flowing smoothly and opportunities appearing easily, field is responding to detecting coherence and alignment in your total consciousness state. Use circumstances as perfect mirror and feedback system, showing you what field observes in you. This allows you to identify actual frequency you're emanating versus frequency you think or hope or claim you're emanating, which is first step toward genuine alignment at all levels rather than just surface performance. Most revolutionary recognition that changes everything once fully grasped. You absolutely cannot hide anything from quantum reflex ever under any circumstances. It reads everything with complete transparency. Every conscious thought, every unconscious pattern, every suppressed emotion, every hidden intention, every denied desire, every unexamined belief. Complete, total, absolute transparency to field is the actual reality of existence, not invasion of privacy or violation of boundaries, because privacy and boundaries never actually existed in the first place. Consciousness isn't contained in separate individual forms that could be private from each other like isolated bubbles. Consciousness is unified field appearing temporarily as multiplicity of apparently separate forms. And field has complete access to all consciousness everywhere, because all consciousness is field observing itself, meaning nothing is actually separate or private or hidden at quantum level, where everything is interconnected and mutually transparent. The critical distinction that determines whether quantum reflex works for you or against you. Quantum reflex responds to coherence, not to content of what you're observing. Coherent negative frequency, where all levels align around same pattern, is more powerful and generates clearer, faster manifestation than incoherent positive, where conscious and unconscious contradict each other. Field reads alignment between all levels of consciousness, between what you state consciously and what you feel unconsciously, between what you perform externally and what you believe internally, between surface and depth. When all levels align perfectly around same frequency pattern, even if that frequency isn't positive by conventional standards, field responds powerfully and precisely because signal is absolutely clear with no contradictions to navigate. When levels contradict each other, saying one thing while feeling another, wanting one thing while expecting another, performing one thing while believing another, field responds chaotically with mixed manifestations, because signal is confused and contradictory, forcing field to respond to conflicting inputs simultaneously, which creates conflicting outcomes. Reality is sending signals right now that prove quantum reflex is actively watching you and responding, organizing circumstances around your consciousness, manifesting reality customized to your frequency, demonstrating that observation is mutual, not one-directional. You've been experiencing that reality responds differently when you're in different states. Same situation encountered while calm produces different outcome than same situation encountered while anxious. This proves quantum reflex is reading your state and manifesting reality accordingly. That circumstances aren't fixed, but fluid, shaped by consciousness state you're in when you observe them. There's also been dramatic increase in synchronicities since you started exploring quantum consciousness. More meaningful coincidences, more perfect timing, more obviously orchestrated circumstances. This isn't you becoming more aware. This is quantum reflex responding to observing consciousness that's paying attention to synchronicity by creating more synchronicity. The field watches what you notice and delivers more of what you're watching for. You've noticed that when you observe with expectation of specific outcome, that outcome tends to manifest. But when you observe same situation expecting different outcome, the different outcome manifests. This proves reality isn't objective fixed thing. It's quantum reflex responding to your expectations by collapsing probability waves, matching what you're observing for. Expectation is form of observation that field reads and responds to. Perhaps most striking is how quickly things manifest now compared to before. Thoughts become circumstances faster, intentions become realities quicker, observations collapse into manifestations more immediately. This acceleration is quantum reflex, responding to consciousness that's becoming more coherent, more conscious of observation power, more aligned internally. The field responds faster to clear signals than to confused signals. There's urgency in recognizing quantum reflex consciously because unconscious observation is manifesting constantly. Whatever you're observing most frequently and intensely is being manifested most powerfully, whether you're conscious of observing it or not. Right now, your fears, your habitual thought patterns, your unconscious beliefs are being read by quantum reflex and manifested as circumstances. The urgency is becoming conscious of what you're observing so you can direct observation rather than letting it run randomly. You've also been experiencing that your presence affects outcomes even when you don't actively intervene. Situations you observe tend to resolve better than situations you're not paying attention to. Problems you're aware of tend to improve, while problems you ignore tend to worsen. This proves observation itself is intervention. Quantum reflex responds to consciousness paying attention by organizing reality to accommodate that attention. The physical sensations you've been experiencing, pressure in head, tingling in body, feeling of being energetically touched or scanned. These aren't random. They're your nervous system detecting quantum reflexes' observation of you, sensing the attention field is paying to your consciousness. The sensations intensify when you're at threshold moments because field's observation intensifies when you're at developmental transitions. You might also be noticing that certain thoughts or observations create immediate emotional or physical responses. Some thoughts feel expansive and energizing, others feel contracting and depleting. This is your system reading quantum reflexes' response to those thoughts. Expansive feeling means field is responding positively to that observation. Contracting feeling means field is indicating that observation leads away from optimal trajectory. Reality is also showing you that when you observe as if something is already true, it tends to become true. But when you observe its absence, the absence persists. This proves quantum reflex responds to observation quality. Observing presence collapses probability waves where thing exists. Observing absence collapses waves where thing doesn't exist. You manifest what you observe, not what you want, but don't observe. Conscious use of quantum reflex requires alignment between all levels of consciousness. Conscious thoughts, unconscious patterns, emotional frequencies, energetic signatures, all broadcasting same signal. Right now there's likely misalignment, thinking one thing while feeling another, wanting one outcome while expecting different outcome. Conscious intention contradicting unconscious belief. Alignment means becoming transparent to yourself, recognizing what you're actually observing rather than what you think you're observing, acknowledging frequency you're actually broadcasting rather than frequency you wish you were broadcasting. Quantum reflex reads truth regardless of pretense, so alignment requires being honest about actual state rather than performing state you think you should have. Here's the practice. Throughout day, pause and ask, what am I actually observing right now? Not what you want to observe, not what you think you should observe. What are you actually observing through thought patterns, emotional states, where your attention is focused? That actual observation is what quantum reflex reads and